the law of the playground, the terrifying system of unwritten traditions, games, taunts and insults that rule the happiest days of every schoolchild in Britain. Joeys, gaylords, fannies, knobs, you get the idea.
Blaze. Sir. Reeves.
Here.
Middlemas.
Here.
Collins.
Present.
McGuinness.
Yes, sir.
Lee.
Yes, sir.
Mack.
Sir.
Dolan.
Present.
Mitchell.
Sir.
Montgomery.
Present.
Carr.
Sir.
Zane.
Here.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
I do not.
I do not poo.
You done a poo?
Remember your first day in your class, your first day in your tutor group? So everyone's kind of, who's the tough kid? Who's going to be the tough kid? Who's going to be the funny kid? Who's going to be the weird kid no one talks to? Who stinks of piss?
Get on with your work.
Teachers.
There was a teacher called Doc Thornhill who shouldn't have been teaching. He was about 98. He'd quite often stand on his head. You know, like you'd be there all in silence doing your maths, and he'd be stood on his head at the end of the classroom.
We did have one teacher, and if you did anything like comb your hair or like look in a mirror, is this a fashion show? And you're like, no, it's just the basics of being a human being, really.
We had a teacher called Mr. Gearney who had a false arm, and he took so much flack. And his false arm, the hand slightly turned out, and we would hang all manner of things on it because he couldn't feel it, of course, because it was a prosthetic arm. And things like condoms would be hung on it, and maybe a tampon or something like that.
The one that I remember most was scratch and sniff. He would scratch his genitalia, and then there'd be a sort of 2 or 3 beats, you know, of real anticipation from the class who knew this, and he would give it a quick sniff, and then he'd turn to the board.
Mr. Brown was, you know, he was actually a nice guy, and his favourite thing was going, when he wanted quiet, he'd go, let's have the volume down, and he loved that.
Teachers don't think, don't mess around, it will go on your permanent record. And for your whole school life, you're thinking, man, I'm not going to get a job because I bunked off once and I called a teacher a tosser, and it's on my permanent record. There is no permanent record. It doesn't exist. It's a myth.
I do remember it being hysterical when you found out the first name of the teacher. So I remember when we found out Mr. Rogers' his name was Nigel, and just shouting it down the corridor, all right, Nige!
Physics teacher called Mr. He couldn't pronounce his R's or his L's. R's came out as a L, and L's came out as a R. And he turned round with a piece of chalk and he wrote, white light and the electromagnetic spectrum. And then turned around and went, white light and the electromagnetic spectrum. He was a lovely man, but what a first lesson. And I respected him from that day forward because he nailed his colours to the fence there, didn't he?
I think I was told about autumn every year from the ages of 4 to the age of about 11. You kind of think, you only know about autumn, don't you? You don't know all the wisdom of the world. You know there's evergreen trees and there's deciduous trees, and that's it. That's the sum of your knowledge. You told me about this years ago. I've got it. I'm fed up with drawing different leaves. I won't need this. Leave me alone. And then you sort of get, I get this. This school thing, it's not about education primarily. It's about somewhere to stick us all. Because you can't have us just running around the place. If it was just, OK, quickly, read, write, autumn, now come back and do your GCSEs, that wouldn't work for society.
School disco.
School disco was a miserable, horrible experience where tall, gangly boys like me were made to realise just how unattractive and insignificant they were to girls.
The main thing of school disco was in your diary, in your journal, you would count down to the school disco. So I'd have 14 days to the school disco, 13 days to the school disco, 12 days to the school disco. And it would just be a countdown, what you're going to wear, who you're going to dance with, who you're going to talk to. And then usually it was a bit of a disappointment. And then the entry of the journal the next day was, school disco was rubbish. It was really crap. Lewis Cross danced with Gina all night.
Now we're right together.
everyone turned up in waistcoats. Do you remember when Jason Donovan and Kylie Minogue, that's especially for you, everyone bought a waistcoat. Everyone was in a waistcoat, even the poor kids. I don't know where they got that waistcoat from, but they were wearing it.
I can remember getting ready hours before I needed to, a little bit girly, but I did. And inexplicably, I still don't understand why I did it, I wore a waistcoat. A fat kid wearing a waistcoat. I was definitely going to pull.
I wanna show you my heart is oh so true, and all the love I have is especially.
I remember once they were playing Duran, because I was a massive Duran Duran fan, and they played Girls on Film, and all the girls just started screaming. Like as if Duran Duran, when the room, no, they're just playing the record. Shut up, shut up. They turned all the lights on at that point and said, right, everyone calm down, or you're not getting any more pop.
If there was like specific moves, like for Rick Astley, it was never going to give you up, so that, and never going to let you down, never going to play around and hurt you, never going to make you cry, never going to say a lie. Can't remember the rest.
I remember dancing with the boy, like, you know, you dance like this. Well, you dance with your arm on their shoulder and they put their hand and you sort of go like this. And everyone else was snogging and he was kind of pulling me towards him and I was just, like, digging my elbows in his arms so he couldn't get any closer because I didn't really fancy him and his breath smelled.
I never got a dance at the school disco. I never got, even the last dance where anyone can get a dance, I never got a dance.
Bring that note up to the front.
Lying.
Given any opportunity, I think most kids, especially boys, lie. You lie about success with girls. Usually lie about what members of your family do. The classic one is that your dad's in SAS.
Basically, kids lied constantly. There's one guy at our school who said that he was the German BMX champion and that he owned a meat factory.
Tom was the best. Tom was brilliant. He was the king of lies. For one, he wrote the code for Batman on the Spectrum. It's pretty good. He found a bale of hash this big in the woods and just keeping it. He's not going to do anything, not going to smoke it or anything, we just can keep it. And while he was in the woods, he found a little hatch which opened up into an underground complex, and he found the weapons room, which was just all manner of weaponry across the walls, including the minigun from Predator.
I once convinced him that on Record Breakers the previous night, I'd seen Jeff Capes throw a fox around the world, and he believed me.
There was a great story a friend of mine bandied about, is that she had spent the night with Prince. He gave her some clothes. He said she could have any clothes she wanted, presumably from his wardrobe. And he showed her a really good time, and then he said, I'm really sorry, I've got a lot of commitments, so we won't be able to, you know, carry this on, but I've had the time of my life. We all believed it.
There was a chap who did a paper round, and he used to come in at lunchtime. There used to be this room, one of the rooms upstairs, and he'd hand out fags, because he'd nick these cartons of 200 fags. So you'd have a selection of Rothmans and B&H, and he was kind of quite popular, but then it was discovered that he was actually buying them to sort of be popular, give them out.
I once pretended to my whole class that Harrison Ford was my father until a friend of mine pointed out that couldn't possibly be true. Nick Nolte Jr. I always hated him.
Chinny Recon? Jimmy Hill?
A Chinny Recon, or a Jiminy, as we used to call it in school, is if you thought your mate was lying or exaggerating the truth, what you do is, you know, you stroke your chin and sort of nod like this to indicate he was full of BS.
There were variations on the Chinny Recon, and they all involved some sort of appendage to the chin. So I think there was a sort of Jimmy Hill type one, a Tutankhamun, which was like that, and Itchy Beard was another one.
You can actually still do it in real life in quite a sort of, oh, that's interesting, actually, you know, just subtly kind of, you invented the Mini, I see, yeah, it's a good car.
I do remember Tutankhamun, that was quite a thing. Boys used to say it and it would be Tutankhamun!
I went to an Egyptian school. Went down like a sack of piss, that. I was the only English kid there.
And to give it extra effect, you repeat back to him what you said. So you'd be like, oh, yeah, on Saturday you went to see West Ham and you got Frank McAvenny's phone number. Oh, yeah. Oh, what's that? You got a new car? Oh, yeah. Oh, what's that? You wasn't at school last week because your mum died of cancer. Oh. Sorry.
I think it should be used more in polite society, you know, around a dinner party. Oh, things are going well for you, are they, at the office? Yeah. Someone was telling me that, yes. That's the word is, your career's going well.
I think chinny record might have been a southern thing. We called it Belm for some reason in the northwest. Like Belm, right? Which I don't know what it. I think Belm was actually the Dutch version of Jimmy Hill.
We didn't do chinny record. We sort of went bah, like that when we were at primary school. But then by the time we turned 12, we were pretty forward about calling each other liars.
Get out!
Farts.
Remember with farting, there was he who smelt it dealt it, and he who said the rhyme did the crime. And that's the basic. That's your bluff and your double bluff. So essentially, anyone commenting on a fart at all might be responsible. But I think the thing with farts is that farting's fine. You know, it happens. Everyone has to fart. Tiny, microscopic quantities of airborne shit. You're not going to get ill by inhaling it. It's not pleasant, but it's necessary. And in general, society needs to just get a grip about farting. We should be allowed to fart whenever and however we feel is necessary.
There was this teacher once, somebody farted, and he went berserk, he said, who was it? Who did that terrible thing?
Who tells us at the age of 4, yeah, no, if you're the one that did the thing that everyone does on this occasion, then that's really humiliating for you. Why? Why can't you put your hand up and say, yep, it was me this time, but we've all had egg for lunch, and we'll all be doing it. And if you're not, your digestion's not working properly.
If somebody farted, as soon as you smelt it, you had to put your hand on your chin, sometimes 2 hands. Don't know why it was 1 hand, 2 hands. The last one to do it would be the one who dealt it, obviously. But, of course, the first one who did it was the one who farted, because they knew it was coming, so you'd wait, how long? Oh, one person's done it, I'll do it now. And then you'd go, and find your victim, the one who hadn't smelt it, who was down the other end of the room, who hadn't put their hand to their chin. Strange.
If someone has done a smelly fart, you're legitimately allowed to go, oh, Jesus Christ! You can say that even in an exam. Jesus Christ! Quiet, please. But, miss, he's farted and it stinks of shit. You could say that. And 9 times out of 10, not get into trouble.
The farts that I was most interested in at school were lady farts, and they were the farts that girls did when they were laughing.
We discovered that our Fanny could fart, and we had hours of enjoyment with that. We discovered it by accident one day, sat in the cloakrooms with our jumpers over our knees, and we just heard the weirdest fart. And I know who it was. I shan't say her surname, but it was Sophie. She was like, oh my God, that fart just came from my Fanny. And we were like, oh my God, how did you do that? And we spent hours trying to fanny fart.
What's the next letter after H in the alphabet? I. What colour is the sky? Blue. What's the opposite of on? Off. You blew off.
Pain. A spam is a slap, preferably with this part of your palm, to the forehead.
Spam is when you go like that on your head. Spam, like this, that would come from nowhere.
And I think that's why a lot of these kids had the wedge haircuts, so not to expose their foreheads. But for me, it was open season.
Jinx was when you said the same thing at the same time with someone else. And whoever shouted jinx the first, that had the right to make sure the other boy was silent. And if he then spoke, he'd get punched by the boy who shouted jinx.
There was the wedgie, which was you just grab someone by the rim of their pants and hoik it up. Or there's the super wedgie, the uber wedgie, where 2 of you would grab like a really weak, frail child, either side, and try and get his pants up to his shoulders, or even over his head. Man, that was brilliant if you could do that.
The only way out of jinx was if someone else, unprompted, says the full name of the boy who was under the jinx, which might take a while, unless, of course, you're being baptised.
I was in the 3rd year and the 1st years, and we used to basically run at each other and smash hell out of each other. You run into someone, and there was no point to it other than that, but I hit this one kid. He was in it, he was running towards me, so I rammed into him, and he had bad asthma, and he was on the floor going, and he was